Hey everybody, and welcome back to Epic Mind Visions. Today I want to talk about why successful people often feel lost after 50. I think we, as men particularly, we work so hard to build things in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and then we get to this place after 50, and I think it happens to so many successful people around this midpoint of our lives. From the outside, we've built amazing things. We've built an amazing career. We have some achievements and experience. Maybe we have reputation, name recognition. But inside, we start to shift, and the things that motivated us decades ago suddenly are not as meaningful because maybe we've already accomplished those things. We've already come to the other resolution, the other side of those things. And we start to feel maybe a little empty. I know I did. I start asking a question that is terrifying and would have terrified me even more if I hadn't pursued it. But what the question is, what do I actually want in my life? And my own journey has really informed these things a lot. This happens, I think, to more people than we know. And it's actually what I'm realizing now is a very predictable stage of life. Like I say, where you've created a family, maybe your kids are off to school or they're adults, maybe they're in their own families and having kids. You've got this career success and all those things are resolved. Now what, right? So success is all relative. It doesn't necessarily equal zeros in your bank account or anything like that, but it's really this feeling of accomplishment that we've done the things that we wanted to do in the first half of our lives, and now we need to focus on the second half. And what does that mean? In the first half, it was building that career, earning the money, raising the kids, gaining some respect, maybe creating some abundance and stability for ourselves and our family. All those things make total sense. There's nothing wrong with those things. But once you kind of established that and gotten over the survival and the security as priorities, then eventually you like I say, you start to feel empty inside and you want to go to the next step. What's the next step at this phase of our life in our lives? Because our minds are wired for novelty, and if we don't really know which direction to go, we don't know which questions to ask. And we need to start asking ourselves better questions so that we can continue to move forward. In our earlier years, we asked, how do I succeed financially, uh, with my family? And then once all those things resolved, then it's like, at least for me, what I started asking was, what is all this for? Why? Why am I even doing this? This was really alive for me once I reached a level of success, a corporate attorney, successful in my career, relatively speaking. And that identity was everything. I thought I would just chase that identity and continue to stack on stack and continue to expand upon that. But then all that was stripped away from me, and it caused me to have a breakdown in my identity. And I think a lot of professional, successful people go through this. Again, it kind of resolves to this stage of life that I'm talking about. The decades or years and years that I spent creating that identity and putting it into place and executing on it all of a sudden disappeared. And the moment that it disappeared was when those deeper questions started to arise for me, at least. Who am I without this identity? Who am I if I'm not a corporate attorney? Who am I if I don't have these things that I'm striving towards? So that was a huge, huge moment in my own journey. And I'm sure a lot of you feel that too. In that collapse of that identity. Even if you stay in that identity, it's still, there's a void to fill there because it doesn't feel as purposeful or meaningful because you've already raised the kids, you've already succeeded at these things. So that identity that's based on profession and your role and your reputation starts to shift. And how do you fill that void? How do you move from this identity where I'm the lawyer, I'm an executive, I'm a provider for my family, I hold it down for everybody. Those titles or identities are, have become more temporary. And when we get to this stage of our lives, all of these things start to bubble up and start to shift at one time, kind of in tandem. You know, maybe our parents have passed away, our kids are away, time suddenly starts to feel more limited, which is some things that I've talked about in other videos on this channel. And when those roles start to loosen up, then it exposes that void in a different way. It exposes that void in a very visceral way where we look in the mirror and we might see something that we don't want to see or that's painful to see. So this identity transformation is something that I went through over the past 10 years, and it's a work in progress. There is no destination. Earlier in life, I was more rebellious and more risk taking. I almost died on a motorcycle a couple of times, and I did a lot of really um, crazy things in retrospect. But I ended up becoming an attorney in my 30s, and then became a father, and then became kind of a single father raising my kids because my ex wasn't in the picture. And each one of those phases of my life required that I die unto myself, into the past identity of who I thought I was, and to recreate myself into the next phase. And now it's very uncomfortable, but that is where the real self-discovery happens. So for any of you out there that are facing this or thinking that you need an identity shift, this is really the hero's journey, if you know Joseph Campbell, where you are taken out of the life that you thought you had. And you can shake that up however you want, whether it's travel or starting a new hobby, changing maybe the focus of your careers. You know, in our early days, I think life feels kind of infinite, like we're going to be here forever. And um, when we don't have as much pressure on our time, we make decisions that maybe aren't our sole path. And now at this stage of our life, we know that that runway is finite. And if if we lean into that and start to recognize that that time is limited and start to identify ways that we can maximize the rest of our time, then this radical shift in identity becomes more and more pertinent and important. It's not about accumulating more achievements, but really about thinking about what actually matters and what you actually want in your life. What are those dreams that you had that you haven't gone after, that you haven't pursued? Maybe you gave up on some of your dreams in your 20s so that you could feed your family and create the career that you needed. This is a personal shift that's different for everybody. I understand that. But I think that at this stage of our lives, it almost has to happen in one way or another, and you're either going to do it consciously or unconsciously. For me, I didn't choose it, but I leaned into it because I had no choice. Basically, it was, the universe kind of forced it upon me by my circumstances, but I leaned into it and I gobbled it up, and I started living with more purpose. I started living with more gratitude, and I started honoring myself in a different way, and I started loving myself, really, the broken parts of myself that I know have held me back from living the life that I've always wanted, and to really recognize that I'm here for a purpose, and I need to reassess what that means for myself in these years. And I need to recognize that if I'm not pursuing my life path in a way that is going to be help me complete those cycles that I came here for, then I need to recalibrate and readjust. And this period of reassessment is based in psychology. It's the evaluation of your career and life choices, your relationships, your beliefs and values, and the purpose that you've maybe served or not served. There's a purpose in everything. And I think if we look deep enough, we can have gratitude for that. But when we start to think about these things and they come up in this way, it can feel like a crisis. But it's actually that course correction and recalibration that I'm talking about. It's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. It's an awakening to who the fuck you really are and who you can be in your life and who you always dreamed you can be, and knowing that all that is possible. And I've done that over my life, and it's a pattern, almost decade-long pattern. Again, very rebellious in my 20s, went to law school in my 30s, created the family and the career. It all got broken up in my 40s. I recreated myself, and now I'm kind of bringing it all together into some form of hopefully wisdom that I can bring back to my community as the elixir in the hero's journey. And that's why I'm making these videos. So that process is available to everyone, and you can choose it. For me, I needed it right then at that moment in my early 40s, so the universe thrust it upon me. But if I had not had that catalyst, I might have waited until now in my 50s and then chosen it. So you can choose it, and it's just that reevaluation and reassessment of get clarity on what you really want and what would bring you joy and what would bring you energy, and be courageous enough to shift from maybe the comfortable, successful version of yourself to the more energized and connected version of yourself. And it's often not about the achievement that you experienced or that you pursued in the first half of your life. It becomes more about the contribution that you can make to the people around you. Instead of building, you start to focus on distilling the parts of your life that you've experienced. And that's what I meant. Like all of my experiences, I'm distilling into hopefully some form of wisdom that will help and guide others to be more courageous and brave. Switching that question from what can I accomplish to what can I give back? How can I serve? How can I serve myself better, my family better, my community better, and make some level of impact? Because that's really where I think it all starts to make sense and have meaning. So I think it's great if you've listened this far, if you're exploring these pathways, exploring these personal areas of yourself, or philosophically, consciously, and at least doing some of the work to start to confront the things that you've maybe given away, your power, your dreams, and start to explore ways to make that course correction and to create those catalysts in your life so that you can evolve into that second half of your life so that you can live more purposefully, more joyfully, and have that level of service and make that level of impact. It's a good sign, actually, when you feel like you're lost, because then you get to look at yourself in your life in a new way. You get to wake up from the dream that you've been in the illusion of the reality that you've been in, that you've created for yourself, so that you could be that provider, so that you could raise those kids, so that you could have some recognition in your career and build that stability. But now you get to wake up from that dream and build the next version of yourself, the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 version of yourself that's going to serve you into the next phases of your life to build meaning and purpose. Deeper reflection, pursuing newer interests or interests that you put to the wayside, waking up spiritually and exploring that, providing mentorship for others, becoming more creative, focusing your energy on more creativity so that this can become the most meaningful phase of your life and not something where you're telling yourself, I'm too old for that, I'm over the hill, it can't be done, it's too late. and just falling into that trap and coming home and self-medicating in front of the TV instead of recognizing this phase of your life as a rebirth. That rebirth is the greatest gift that you could ever have. Thanks so much for joining me on this video. Like, subscribe, comment. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care. Peace.